Japan's earthquake scale ends at level 7. There's no level 8. And this afternoon, 2 towns south of Kumamoto City maxed it out. People are trapped. A shopping mall has partially collapsed with casualties feared, and more than 150,000 people are out of their homes. But the number that should worry you most is 28, because the last time this exact fault system did this, the bigger earthquake came 28 hours later. Here is what just happened, and why officials say the next week is the real danger. A magnitude 7.1 earthquake tore through Kumamoto Prefecture on the Japanese island of Kyushu at 4:27 this afternoon. Local time. The shaking hit without meaningful warning for the people closest to the fault. At that distance, the alert and the ground motion arrived nearly together. And within seconds, 2 communities were experiencing something that only a handful of humans in history have ever had, measured beneath their feet. The Japan Meteorological Agency registered a maximum seismic intensity of 7 in Uki City and the town of Hikawa. You need to understand what that number means, because it is the single most important fact of this entire event. Japan's intensity scale, the Shindo scale, ends at 7. There is no level 8. The scale physically cannot report anything worse. 2 communities south of Kumamoto City just recorded the most violent ground motion that Japanese instruments are built to classify. The Shindo scale deserves 30 seconds of explanation, because the rest of this story runs on it. The scale runs from 0 through 7 in 10 steps. Levels 5 and 6 are each split into a lower and an upper tier, and it is measured by instruments on the ground at hundreds of stations, not estimated from the size of the quake. Japan built its warning systems, its building codes, and its public alerts around intensity rather than magnitude for a simple reason. Intensity is what actually hits you, and the top of that ladder, the level with nothing above it, is what 2 towns experienced this afternoon. Japan has recorded a Shindo 7 only 7 times before in the entire instrumented era. Kobe in 1995, Niigata in 2004, the Tohoku megaquake in 2011, Kumamoto twice in 2016, Hokkaido in 2018, the Noto Peninsula in 2024. Today makes 8, and 3 of those 8 readings have now come from this one prefecture. At intensity 7, people cannot stay on their feet. Furniture does not slide across the room. It launches. Reinforced concrete walls can come down, and unreinforced buildings simply fail. This is the strongest nation on Earth when it comes to earthquake preparation, and the videos coming out of Kumamoto right now show buildings burning, roads split open, and people being pulled from collapsed structures. When Japan looks like this, the shaking was extraordinary. The numbers behind the event tell you why, and it gets worse the closer you look. The rupture occurred at a depth of roughly 10 kilometers, about 6 miles. To put that in perspective, that is shallower than a cruising airliner flies high. The energy of a magnitude 7.1 had almost no distance to weaken before it reached homes, schools, roads, and rail lines, because this earthquake did not strike offshore. It struck inland, directly beneath one of the more densely populated corridors of Kyushu, just south of Kumamoto City. The United States Geological Survey placed the epicenter about 5 kilometers east of Uto City, and initially registered the event at magnitude 6.8, a normal early spread between agencies. The Japan Meteorological Agency, with the densest seismic network on the planet sitting directly on top of the rupture, says 7.1. The magnitude spread between the 2 agencies will converge over the coming days as more data gets processed, and the difference matters less than it looks. Between 6.8 and 7.1 lies roughly a factor of 2 in released energy, a real gap, but both numbers describe the same brutal reality on the ground because the shaking has already been measured directly. The intensity reading is not an estimate that gets revised. Those instruments in Uki and Hikawa recorded what they recorded. 2 different numbers are getting confused everywhere online right now, so let's fix that in 30 seconds. Magnitude measures the total energy the fault released. 1 number for the whole earthquake. Intensity measures how violently the ground moved where you were standing. A different number at every location. A magnitude 7.1 is nowhere near the largest earthquake Japan has ever experienced, but a shallow rupture directly under a populated area delivers its energy point blank. And that is how a 7.1 produces the maximum reading on the intensity scale, while far larger offshore quakes sometimes do not. The geometry of this event was close to the worst case available for this fault system, and the damage reports coming in reflect exactly that. The most serious single incident of this earthquake is unfolding at a shopping mall. An Aeon Mall was rocked by an explosion after the quake, and the second floor of the building has partially collapsed with a large number of people trapped inside. Police have said, in their words, that quite a few people are presumed dead in that incident. White smoke was seen rising from the structure. An Aeon spokesperson says customers and employees were being evacuated immediately after the initial quake, and that the exact cause of the explosion is still unclear. Nobody has put a confirmed death toll on this yet, and I am not going to invent one, but the language police are using tells you they do not expect good news. Consider the timing for a moment. 4:27 on a Tuesday afternoon is close to peak traffic for a Japanese shopping mall. School is out, errands are running, the food courts are busy. An explosion following an earthquake usually points toward gas, though officials have not confirmed that, and the combination of blast damage and structural collapse makes this one of the most difficult rescue environments possible. Crews will be working that building through the night, and every aftershock that rolls through forces them to pull back and re-enter. The mall is where the death toll of this earthquake will most likely be decided. The wider damage picture is filling in by the hour, and none of it is small. The National Police Agency reports at least 12 buildings collapsed, including 4 separate cases where people were still trapped inside houses, with most of those collapse reports concentrated in the city of Yatsushiro. The Prime Minister has confirmed that a large bridge has come down in the region. Emergency lines at the Uki Regional Fire Headquarters were overwhelmed within the first hour, with multiple building fires burning and people trapped in more than one location. Kumamoto City is reporting its own fires with people trapped. In Hikawa, the same town that recorded the maximum intensity, at least 50 people have been injured and transported to hospitals, including multiple people hurt at a care home. More than 50 others are hospitalized in Kumamoto City, at least one of them unconscious. That puts the confirmed injury count past 100 already, with calls still coming in from people pinned under collapsed furniture and fallen structures. The scale of the response tells you how seriously Japan is taking the next several days. More than 150,000 people have evacuated, and instructions to move to evacuation centers reportedly cover as many as 300,000 residents. Around 50,000 households in Kumamoto lost electricity, and Kyushu Electric is warning people not to touch downed power lines. JR Kyushu suspended service on every one of its rail lines, including the Kyushu Shinkansen. The bullet train is stopped. Kumamoto Airport closed its runway. Japan's defense minister has ordered coordinated ground, maritime, and air self-defense force operations. The National Police Agency opened a disaster headquarters in Tokyo. Kumamoto City convened its own emergency task force, and Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi stood up a government task force within the hour, saying lives are the top priority. The transport shutdowns are not overcaution. They are procedure with a body count behind it. High-speed rail lines cannot run until every kilometer of track, every viaduct, and every tunnel portal has been physically inspected, because a bullet train meeting a displaced rail joint at nearly 300 kilometers per hour is its own mass casualty event. The runway closure at Kumamoto Airport follows the same logic. Pavement inspection after maximum intensity shaking is not optional. Expect rolling partial restorations over the coming days, prioritized around getting rescue equipment and supplies moving. The mobilization matters because of what it implies. Japan does not empty 1/3 people out of their homes for an earthquake it believes is over. Every piece of this response is built around the possibility that today's quake was not the end of the sequence. And the evacuation itself carries a danger that this prefecture knows better than anywhere on Earth. In 2016, a large share of Kumamoto's deaths were not people crushed in the shaking. They were disaster-related deaths that came afterward, in the weeks of evacuation, from stress, from medical disruption, from people sleeping in cars. Keeping 300,000 displaced people healthy is itself a disaster response problem, and it starts tonight. We will get to exactly why officials are holding everyone out of their homes in a moment, because it is the core of this story. The tsunami side of this event, thankfully, is the part that resolved quickly. Within roughly 2 minutes of the rupture, the Japan Meteorological Agency issued a tsunami advisory for the coastlines of the Ariake Sea and the Yatsushiro Sea, with waves of up to 1 meter, about 3.3 feet, considered possible. The Prime Minister publicly told people to stay away from the coast. Now, 1 meter sounds survivable, and that instinct is exactly wrong. Moving water at that height takes adults off their feet, drags vehicles, and pulls people out to sea. Even lower waves have killed. The advisory carried real weight despite the modest number. The 2-minute issuance time is worth appreciating, because it looks impossible and isn't. The Japan Meteorological Agency does not compute tsunami forecasts from scratch in real time. It maintains a database of pre-calculated scenarios for faults all over the country, and the moment an event is located and sized, the closest matching scenario fires the alert. 2 minutes from rupture to coastal warning is the payoff of decades of preparation. And it exists because the Ariake and Yatsushiro seas are enclosed, shallow bodies of water where any wave arrives fast, with almost no time to react. In the end, no significant tsunami waves were recorded, and the advisory has been lifted. That outcome makes physical sense. This was a strike-slip-style rupture inside the crust underland, not the kind of offshore seafloor displacement that generates large tsunamis. The clean tsunami outcome also carries information about the earthquake itself. Faults that move the seafloor vertically push water. Faults that grind sideways or rupture under land mostly do not. Today's event fits the second category, which matches everything else we know about the crustal fault system responsible. The water threat is over. The ground threat is not, and that distinction is exactly where this story is heading. The question everyone asks the moment they hear the words earthquake and Japan in the same sentence is about nuclear power. 2 plants sit in the wider region, Sendai and Ginkai, in neighboring prefectures. Kyushu Electric has completed first checks at both and reports no abnormalities. That is the single most important early number of this entire event, and right now it is good. It will be checked again and again after every significant aftershock. Kumamoto also sits at the center of Japan's semiconductor build-out, and that gives this earthquake a reach far beyond Kyushu. TSMC, the largest chipmaker on Earth, runs its Japanese fab complex in this prefecture and evacuated workers from the plant as a precaution. Sony operates image sensor plants in the same corridor, and there is precedent here that the industry remembers. The 2016 Kumamoto earthquakes damaged Sony's local production and rippled through the global camera sensor supply for months. That is part of why billions of dollars of fab investment in this exact prefecture always carried an asterisk, and today the asterisk cashed in. Neither company has reported damage to operations so far, and both are still assessing. Chip fabs are extraordinarily vibration-sensitive facilities, and even a clean shutdown and restart costs real production time. If those assessments turn up damage, you will feel this earthquake in global electronic supply chains. But the machines can be replaced. The next section is about the people, because the most unsettling part of today is not what already happened. It is what this exact patch of ground did the last time. 10 years ago, in April of 2016, Kumamoto was hit by a magnitude 6.5 earthquake that also registered a maximum intensity of 7. Seismologists treated it as the main shock. Residents were told the worst had passed. People who had evacuated began returning to damaged homes. 28 hours later, a magnitude 7.3 ruptured the connected Futagawa fault, larger than the first quake, also registering intensity 7, and the event everyone had called the main shock was reclassified, after the fact, as a foreshock. The first earthquake had not been the disaster. It had been the warning. Roughly 276 people died across that sequence, many in buildings weakened by the first shock that came down in the second. The mechanics of that double blow explain most of the deaths. Buildings in the town of Mashiki rode out. The first intensity 7 shaking cracked, but standing. And then the second stronger quake arrived before anyone could shore them up, and they pancaked with people inside. Kumamoto Castle, one of Japan's most treasured fortresses, lost walls and roof tiles in the first event, and suffered far worse in the second. Search crews in 2016 were pulled off rubble piles by the second quake in the middle of active rescues. Every one of those images is sitting in the institutional memory of the officials making decisions in Kumamoto right now. That history is not trivia. It is the operating manual for everything Japan is doing tonight. The 2016 sequence forced the Japan Meteorological Agency to rewrite its public guidance. The agency stopped reassuring people that aftershocks would only get smaller because Kumamoto had just proven that assumption can kill. The current guidance, born directly from this prefecture's experience, is that for roughly a week after a large inland earthquake, a quake of comparable size can follow. And that is precisely what Prime Minister Takaichi told the country today, in plain language. Take precautions, because earthquakes of similar scale are possible for about a week. And when you hear that warning, understand that it is not generic caution. It is this exact fault system's own track record, written into national policy, now pointed back at the place that created it. There is one more historical wrinkle that deserves a mention, because it is genuinely eerie. On July 28, 1889, the same calendar date as today, a magnitude 6.3 earthquake struck Kumamoto, killed around 20 people, and destroyed portions of Kumamoto Castle. That is coincidence, not pattern. But it tells you this ground has been doing this for as long as humans have kept records of it. The aftershock sequence is already running, and it started almost immediately. A magnitude 4.5 hit about 2 minutes after the main shock. Further aftershocks followed at 4:39 and 4:55 in the afternoon, and a separate intensity 5 event registered in the Amakusa and Ashikita area just after 5 o'clock. Seismologists lean on a statistical rule called Both's Law here. Across thousands of sequences, the largest aftershock typically lands about 1.1 to 1.2 magnitude units below the main shock. Applied to today, That benchmark sits around magnitude 5.9 to 6.0. That is not a forecast, and after what you just heard about 2016, you understand why nobody in Japan treats it as a ceiling either. It is a baseline expectation. The sequence's most probable worst card, drawn from a deck that occasionally holds something bigger. The intensity 5 already recorded in the Amakusa and Ashikita area shows the sequence is capable of producing damaging shaking on its own, entirely separate from the question of a second main shock. The overall shape of the sequence follows a second statistical rule, Omori's law, which says aftershock frequency decays with time. Rapid at first, then thinning out over days and weeks. The pattern that matters is the decay itself. A sequence that fades on schedule is a sequence behaving normally. A sequence that stalls, surges, or produces events that stop getting smaller is the one that earns attention, because 2016 taught this prefecture that the difference between an aftershock and a foreshock only exists in hindsight. Each earthquake magnitude step also represents roughly 32 times more energy, which is why the gap between today's 7.1 and an expected magnitude 6 aftershock is enormous on a seismograph, and yet nearly irrelevant to a wall that is already halfway down. A magnitude 6 releases only a small fraction of the energy of a 7.1, and people consistently underestimate how dangerous that still is. The second hit does not land on the Kumamoto that existed this morning. It lands on cracked walls, on retaining structures already under strain, on slopes primed to fail, on 12 collapsed buildings worth of neighborhoods where everything still standing has been weakened. The second earthquake does not need to match the first. It only needs to be strong enough to finish what the first one started, and a high 5 is well inside that range. The diagnostic to watch over the next few days is the aftershock map. If the epicenters stay tightly clustered around Uki, this is a normal sequence winding down, and each passing day makes a repeat less likely. If the epicenters start stretching into a line running northeast or southwest along the fault zone, seismologists will be asking a much harder question, whether stress is loading the next segment of the system. That migration pattern is part of what preceded the escalation in 2016. Until that map exists in filled-in form, nobody in Japan can honestly tell you the worst is over. And the honest ones are saying exactly that. The misinformation started circulating within the first hour, and 3 claims in particular are spreading fast. All 3 are wrong, and knocking them down actually sharpens what is true. The biggest one says this earthquake struck on the Nankai Trough, or that it has begun the long-feared Nankai megaquake. It did not. The Nankai Trough is an offshore subduction interface east of here, the source region for Japan's magnitude 8 and 9 scenarios. Today's rupture happened inside the shallow crust of central Kyushu, on the Futagawa and Hinagu fault zones, the same system that broke in 2016, tens of kilometers away from and structurally separate from the subduction interface. Every large earthquake redistributes stress in the surrounding crust, and seismologists will genuinely watch that. But claiming this event activated the Nankai Trough goes far beyond anything the data shows, and no agency has linked the two. Some of the confusion traces to early automated postings that plotted the event near the trough before reviewed locations came in. The reviewed epicenter is inland, under Kumamoto. There is a reason the Nankai anxiety runs so close to the surface, and it deserves an honest sentence. In August of 2024, after magnitude 7.1 struck offshore in the Hyuga-Nara Sea just east of Kyushu, the Japan Meteorological Agency issued its first ever Nankai Trough megaquake advisory, because that quake occurred near the edge of the actual subduction system. No such advisory has been issued today, and that difference is diagnostic. When an event genuinely touches the Nankai system, Japan has a formal mechanism that says so, loudly. Its silence on that front tonight is the clearest statement available of what this earthquake is and is not. The second claim is visual. Video of stonework crashing down at Kumamoto Castle is circulating as if it were shot today. The castle was devastated in the 2016 earthquakes, and its restoration is still ongoing a decade later, which means old clips and new clips are nearly impossible to tell apart. Some castle damage today is entirely plausible given the intensity, but treat every specific clip as reported, not confirmed until authorities verify it. The third claim involves volcanoes. Kyushu hosts Mount Aso, whose caldera sits immediately northeast of the 2016 ruptures, along with Kirishima and Sakurajima, and all of them will be watched closely now. A tectonic earthquake does not mean magma is rising. The signals that would actually matter are sustained volcanic tremor, rapid ground deformation, major changes in gas output, or an official alert level change. And none of those has been reported in connection with today's event. Strip away all 3 false claims, and the real picture is actually more unnerving than the fake one. The genuine threat is not a distant trench or a volcano. It is this same fault, this same week, under these same weakened towns. The next 7 days are the story now. Here is what to watch in order of importance. Watch the aftershock map. Clustering around Uki is good news. Migration along the fault line is not. Watch the magnitudes. Both's law says the biggest aftershock is statistically due around magnitude 6, and anything approaching the original 7.1 would mean 2016 is repeating in front of us. Watch the casualty figures from the mall in the morning hours, because that is where today's toll will be defined. And watch the nuclear checks after every significant aftershock. Clean so far, and every clean report matters. The official guidance could not be clearer. People in the hardest hit areas are being told to stay out of damaged buildings, keep away from slopes and retaining walls, and be ready for shaking of similar scale for about a week. Expect the numbers in this story to move overnight. Injury counts rise as hospitals report in. The mall operation will produce hard news one way or the other, and the Japan Meteorological Agency will be holding regular briefings as the sequence develops. Magnitude revisions are also normal in the first days. Do not read a shifted decimal as anyone hiding anything. The reviewed data always lags the event, and Japan publishes all of it. If there is one thing this prefecture has taught the world, it is that the label main shock is only ever assigned in hindsight. Kumamoto learned that lesson at a cost of 276 lives 10 years ago, and every emergency decision Japan makes this week is built on refusing to make the same assumption twice. We will know within days which version of this story we are in: a violent quake, followed by a normal, fading sequence, or the opening act that 2016 turned out to be. The rescue crews working the mall and the collapsed houses in Yatsushiro tonight are operating inside that uncertainty. The instruments are running, the map is filling in hour by hour. This channel will be tracking every development in this sequence as it lands. Stay with the data, not the rumors. And if you're anywhere on Kyushu tonight, keep your shoes by the bed.